Hi guys, here is Audrey Meyer. I'm with John Chavez. Welcome to another series of Find Your Superpower, Hack Your Body and Mind to Become Unstoppable. So I'm really excited today to be with John Chavez because he's the founder of DMT Quest. And John also will share today what the endogenous DMT is and how we naturally produce it. So I've been looking for this interview for quite some time, so I'm really excited. So hi John, how are you?
Doing pretty good. How about you?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for your time. As I say, I'm super excited about this interview because I think I'm gonna learn a lot from you. You guys, the audience, is gonna learn a lot, and I'm really excited about that. So, John, can you tell us a little background about who is John Chavez, and please also talk about your book, Question for the Lion Timer. Just tell us a little bit about. I'm just reading it right now, so I just want to make sure that everyone knows what's about.
Yeah, sure. I was just a regular fellow, living life, working in, not necessarily anything special going on. In my early 30s, I had what they call a spiritual experience, spiritual awakening that I never believed could occur. It led me down the path of researching how these spiritual experiences tend to take place, at least based on our physiology and brain history, and led me to go down the path of really trying to study what the human potential really is all about. We understand things like intelligence vary from person to person, but we don't have a really good grasp of how some people are capable of doing very supernormal things, such as somebody like Wim Hof from Holland, he has 26 Guinness World Records showing that his breathwork technique can modulate your immune system as well as your autonomic nervous system. So I think that these are just touching the tip of the iceberg of what the human potential really is. And basically, it started me down my path, like I said, when I had my spiritual awakening of trying to reverse engineer how these things occur. And so I ended up writing my two books, Questions for the Lion Tamer 1, delving into the mystery that is DMT, and then Questions for the Lion Tamer 2, Swimming in Electric Ayahuasca. So these books are based in science. I tend to utilize a lot of references. I think between both books, there's about 1,200 peer-reviewed references in terms of studying the different physiological correlates that coincide with mystical experiences and possibly even supernormal abilities.
Awesome, awesome. I love it. And so obviously you've been in that research for a while, and you've been experimenting yourself. So John, can you tell us a little bit the most recent research about endogenous DMT states?
Yeah, so the leading endogenous DMT researchers are from the University of Michigan, Dr. Jima Boyajian's lab, and John Dean. They came out with a very big study last year. So prior to this study in 2019, a lot of the speculation regarding endogenous DMT was in regard to the pineal gland, which is a small endocrine gland located in the middle of the brain in the third ventricle, and possibly the lungs being a source of DMT in the periphery that possibly led to the creation of DMT in the lungs, and it would go up to the brain via the blood flow. But in 2019, the University of Michigan came out with a new study showing that DMT is actually produced not only in the pineal gland, but also at the choroid plexus, which is they're on both sides of the brain, the left and right hemisphere of the brain, and they produce cerebral spinal fluid. So I found that to be very interesting, as well as DMT being the entire brain. DMT was found to be synthesized based on the enzymatic precursors. So that was a big finding for part of that study that was published. Another part that was published was that they found that DMT levels in the extracellular fluid of the brain are similar to that of serotonin, dopamine, and norepinephrine. And this was actually found in animal models. So when I'm referring to an animal model, I'm referring to that they did microdialysis probing. So they stuck small needles in the brain of live rats, and they took out the fluid samples to measure the neurotransmitter levels. And this was a very important finding because usually what we've a lot of the speculation has only been around near-death experiences or things like the dream state. But this study alludes to the fact that it's actually produced all the time in our waking consciousness. So that was a huge finding, and it really changed the whole conversation of endogenous DMT altogether. And then the third part of the study that they came up with in last year was that they found that in the following cardiac arrest in animal models of rats, they found that in the visual cortex in rats that DMT levels increased 600% within half an hour of that cardiac arrest. So it provides some support to the notion that endogenous DMT might coincide with the near-death experience and the visionary states that have been reported throughout time, throughout humankind.
Interesting. So can you go a little deeper about DMT and near-death experience? Because I know you've also been talking about that in your book, as much as meditation and hypnosis and sleep pattern. So can you go a little deeper into that?
Yeah, so it's interesting because I believe it was 2013 that the same lab in Michigan put out a study regarding the electrophysiology of the brain during near-death experiences. And prior to this study, neuroscientists believe that the brain just shut down during cardiac arrest or following near-death experience, or following the death experience, that the brain would just shut down. But in reality, what they found was the complete opposite, was that there was actually a huge surge in gamma waves, which is considered a faster oscillation in the brain, seemingly coinciding with heightened experience, with heightened awareness. So they found that in the 2013 study published in Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, that the dying brain actually has a greater enhanced capacity. And this seems to coincide possibly with a similar sort of brain activity we've seen during the psychedelic experience. So when people take high-dose mushrooms or ayahuasca or DMT, we've also seen a similar spike in gamma waves. So these hallucinatory phenomena or hallucinatory experiences seem to coincide with greater oscillations in the brain. So it's just a little bit miss some of these things like near-death experiences as purely hallucinations, but if the brain is operating at a faster capacity than normally, when we're normally focused or normally engaged in something, maybe that will change the perception of what these hallucinations are really comprised of. So yeah, the near-death experience has long been speculated to correlate with endogenous DMT, but I think the more that the data piles up, it creates an even stronger argument that there is likely a role that DMT plays in it. It doesn't necessarily mean that the entire experience is DMT based though, but it just means that there's probably likely a correlate with it.
Interesting, very interesting. So also, John, in your book, you're talking about DMT research helps solving illness problem as stress, as cancer, as anxiety. So, and early on, you were talking about breathing methods, about Wim Hof, and I've actually been practicing his method. So can you tell us a little bit how we personally can control our own DMT levels? John, are you still here? Are you still here, John?
Yeah, I'm here. It cut out just a little bit.
Okay, did you get my question?
I didn't hear the end of it.
Yeah, how can a person control their own DMT level?
So right now in humans, this is a bit speculative because we do not have the technology to measure DMT in a human brain. So because we use or because the University of Michigan utilizes microdialysis, that's not a technique that they can use on humans. But from what I understand, they're looking to possibly develop non-invasive ways to measure endogenous DMT and possibly correlating endogenous DMT with the gamma waves. So if that correlate ever happens, that DMT and gamma waves happen, then we can actually take a different, more quantitative perspective of whether DMT is actually playing a role in whether it be breath work, hypnosis, meditation, sensory deprivation, or even dream sleep, which is interesting because in all these states, we also see an increase in gamma wave. So when a person is in deep meditation, especially people that are very experienced in meditation, we see a huge spike in gamma wave. So it seems like quieting the brain down in order to have a surge in gamma wave might be a manner in which somebody can have a DMT-like experience or possibly correlated with endogenous DMT. In terms of like breath work, it's very interesting that the choroid plexus that produces cerebral spinal fluid also produces DMT, but it's also modulated by respiration. So the amount of cerebral spinal fluid that's produced throughout the brain is directly correlated with your breath work. So the less breath work that you have, the less cerebral spinal fluid you're producing, and possibly the less DMT that's floating around in your brain. But these are studies that still need to take place.
Interesting. And are there any study where there's link between DMT and schizophrenia or other mental disorder associated with hallucinations?
That's a great question, and it's been long talked about and speculated for about 40 to 50 years now. One of the interesting things is based on research out of Hungary, Ed Fresca found that DMT actually has a lot of neuroprotective properties like anti-inflammatory, antioxidant. And one of the things that I've found in my research regarding, mental illness or schizophrenia or even things like dementia or Alzheimer's is that a lot of these neuropsychiatric disorders have an underlying they have a neuroinflammation, like prolonged neuroinflammation. So the hypothesis that DMT is the cause of something like schizophrenia doesn't make sense to me, because if this compound is an anti-inflammatory and an antioxidant, it doesn't seem as though it would be the cause of inflammation in the brain. Instead, I believe is that chronic inflammation in the brain might lead more release of DMT to be neuroprotective. And as being a neuroprotective, it tries to alleviate the inflammation, but in doing so, an overproduction of it might cause some sort of hallucinations in the process. So it's a very complicated conversation, but I think that it's worth having in regards to DMT's role in these illnesses. And I don't think it's a cause. I think it's a protective mechanism. Similarly, like if you get a cut on your skin on your arm, the wound heals, right? It heals automatically. So for me, if you're having these sort of inflammation in the brain or even lesions in the brain, there's probably an autonomic process in which the body releases a certain set of compounds, maybe including DMT, that correlates with trying to repair the brain, but in the process having some visionary experiences.
Yes, that makes sense. Very interesting. I guess there's still so much research going on, right? So it's very interesting about the capacity and about what the future is coming up. So talking about the future, what do you envision for DMT, for the DMT quest in the future?
Well, I see that I look at DMT Quest, the company, as a media company that can go ahead and develop content around DMT research. Because what's been happening over the past 50 years is that while psychedelic research has recently taken off with Tim Ferriss helping Johns Hopkins raise over $20 million for the research and other universities getting funding for psychedelic research, endogenous DMT research has very much lagged in the past 50 years. And that's an issue in terms of having a better understanding of mystical experiences, visionary experiences, and what I believe to be supernormal abilities that might correlate with DMT. So what I'm looking for is to raise awareness that this research needs financial support, that is extremely interesting, and to provide a platform that can translate these studies into terms that the general public can understand, making like things like video documentaries and maybe podcasts. So instead of the public having to read the studies, that they can just watch something and have a better understanding of how things take place. So yeah, that's my goal for this year and many years to come, is to develop content and to raise funds for these researchers.
Yeah, and it's thank you so much for doing that and spending your time and energy to creating that awareness, because there's so much possibility out there, right? Especially I see it as a healing holistic way to heal people versus drugs in pharmaceutic. I know you also talk about that in your book, about pharmaceutic versus natural healing. Can you just go a little bit deeper into that? Can you talk about the natural healing?
Yeah, sure. Listen, my perspective is that healing will come wherever it comes, whether it be from a pharmaceutical or a natural source. To me, it doesn't matter, but I'm also always looking for the most efficient way, the most cost-effective way with the least amount of side effects. So if we're talking about that, then we're generally going to be, I guess, veering more towards natural health, because obviously the pharmaceuticals, while some of them are important and they can be very effective in acute trauma settings, for long-term metabolic disease, I don't think that that's the best route. So yeah, in terms of natural healing, there's so many opportunities out there, especially in 2020. There's so much information out there. It's up to the people to find the good information and sort through the stuff that's maybe not so clear. But yeah, I believe things like breath work are extremely important for one's health, for one's brain health. Breath work is extremely important, knowing that one of the cleansing mechanisms of the brain is breathing. So one of the most important aspects of sleep is actually your breath cycle. When you hear somebody breathe in through their nose and out through their mouth rhythmically for hours, that's not just randomly taking place. That's in place so your brain actually cleanses, you know? So that's an extremely important aspect of health. Other things like fasting are extremely important. I think there's enough research out there to indicate that things like intermittent fasting or even short and long-term fasting have profound benefits throughout the body systemically, for your nervous system, your gut, your heart, your liver. So just from a very basic standpoint of spending no money, something like breath work and fasting, those two things are extremely powerful. And, you know, we could probably go on for hours about natural health, but those two things alone, your sleep, your breath work, and, you know, your digestive integrity, those three things have to be a foundation for your health, I believe.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, because actually on the show we have some other speaker talking about breath work and talking about fasting and talking about sleep, right? And those are free, right? We all breathe freely, we all sleep freely. So if there's a way to improve that without spending money and without buying drug and buying something which is cost, it's something we can work on it every day and for free. So
Yeah.
yeah, I love it. I just love what you say and what you share. So, John, thank you so much for sharing this value, this knowledgeable value. I just want to make sure people find you. So please tell us about your website. And I know you have newsletter where people can sign up, and you also have a book. So can you just mention that again?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, you can check me out at dmtquest.org. It's a nonprofit, so that's why you have the .org. Like I said, I wrote 2 books, but actually all the content is for free. You can find it on the website if you just click on the books link, and then you can go. It's divided into the chapters, and you can read them one by one. If you prefer to read something hard, like, you know, on paper, then you can order the books. But you know, I want to keep the information free. I want people to have access to it, so you can just visit the website. And my email is all over the place on the site following each article. So if you have any questions or comments or anything, just reach out to me and we can have a conversation, because I'm an open book.
Great. Thank you so much. I love your mission, John. So thank you. Thank you for the interview. And thank you guys for following us today. Stay tuned for more exciting interview. And I see you guys tomorrow. John, thank you. You have a great day and wishing you guys awesome day.
You too. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you.